I don't know how to begin this without sounding like I'm losing my mind. But I swear to you, the moment that silence hit me in that room, everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, changed. And if I'm being honest, I don't think I'll ever be the same again. This all started on a random Friday night, like any other. The kind of night when you don't expect anything to happen, let alone the unraveling of everything you've built. I'm not the type of guy who gets paranoid or jumps to conclusions. In fact, I've always prided myself on being a calm, level-headed person. But after that night, I've questioned everything about myself, about the people I trust, about the person I thought I married. It was an evening with no plans. Just me and her, Sarah, in the living room, talking about what we wanted to do. She was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, while I was flipping through a book, trying to enjoy the quiet. Then, out of nowhere, she suggested we go out. We'd been cooped up for a while. Her words were casual, nothing serious, just a thought she tossed out into the air. But for some reason, that simple question planted a seed of discomfort in me. It wasn't that I didn't want to go out. I just wasn't in the mood. But I could tell by the way she looked at me, her eyes hopeful, her expression soft, that she needed it. She needed a break. Okay, I said, a little reluctantly. Where do you want to go? She smiled, and just like that, the decision was made. She picked a place. A bar that we used to visit a lot when we first started dating. The one place where everything felt right. It was familiar, easy. We used to go there and spend hours, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. It had been a while since we'd gone, but there was a comfort in it. It felt like a place where things hadn't changed, where time stood still. And that night, it should have felt like any other night. We arrived, and immediately, I felt the weight of the evening settling on me. The air inside was thick, buzzing with noise, and the lights were dim enough to give everything an almost dreamlike quality. There were people scattered about, but the crowd wasn't overwhelming. We found a small table in the corner, ordered drinks, and started chatting. It was nothing out of the ordinary at first. We were just two people catching up, reconnecting in the way that's easy to do when you've been with someone for so long. But after a while, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like the air in the room had changed just slightly. And then, as the night wore on, I began to notice the small things. The way Sarah kept checking her phone, the way her eyes darted to the door whenever someone new walked in. At one point, I asked her if everything was okay. She smiled and said it was, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a nervous energy about her that I couldn't ignore. It was like something was about to happen, something she was waiting for, but she couldn't quite put it into words. Eventually, I decided to step outside for a moment to clear my head. The noise inside had become suffocating. I needed a break, some space. I didn't want to confront her yet, didn't want to press her, so I just left her at the table. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the odd feeling in my chest. The cool night air was refreshing. I pulled my phone out, checked for messages, nothing important. I leaned against the wall, waiting for the unease to pass. That's when I saw them. Two people, one woman, one man, walking down the street, heading towards the bar. They were laughing, almost too loudly, like they were trying to draw attention to themselves. The woman was dressed in a tight red dress, her heels clicking against the pavement. She looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place her. The man beside her was tall, with dark hair and a sharp jawline. There was something about his posture, something too confident, too deliberate. It made me uncomfortable. I couldn't help but watch them as they neared the bar, the woman leaning in closer to him, laughing a little too much, a little too loudly. There was a familiarity in their closeness that hit me in the gut. I turned away, trying to shake the feeling off. It didn't matter. They were just strangers, right? But something about the way they walked into the bar, something about the way they both glanced inside before heading in, it made my stomach churn. I stayed outside for another few minutes, trying to talk myself out of the gnawing feeling that something was wrong. When I went back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The music was quieter now, the energy in the room heavier. I looked around for Sarah, but she was nowhere to be seen. At first, I thought she might have gone to the bathroom or stepped outside, but when I looked around the bar again, I noticed her sitting at the far end, talking with the man I'd seen outside. My stomach dropped. There was something in the way they were sitting, in the way she was laughing, that didn't sit right with me. She had that look in her eyes, something too familiar, too comfortable. Her shoulders were relaxed, her posture open, as if they had known each other for years. But I didn't know him. I stood there frozen for a moment, watching them interact. It wasn't just a casual conversation. It was something more. Something I wasn't a part of. And that's when it hit me. There was something she wasn't telling me. Something I didn't know. Something that I should have seen before. But I didn't. And now, everything felt wrong. I turned around and walked towards the bar. I was too afraid to confront her yet, but I couldn't ignore the creeping feeling in my gut. I just needed to get close enough to understand what was happening. But just as I took a step, the entire room seemed to pause. It wasn't the kind of pause where people stopped talking for a moment to notice something. This was different. This was deliberate. Everyone in the room had stopped what they were doing, turned to look at me. It felt like I had walked into the middle of something I wasn't supposed to see. And in that silence, I realized something. Something I still don't fully understand. But whatever it was the beginning of everything falling apart. I didn't know how long I stood there, frozen in place. The silence in the room was deafening. But it wasn't just the noise that felt wrong. It was the weight of all those eyes on me. It was as if the entire world had stopped, just waiting for me to react, to make sense of what I was seeing. My eyes were locked on Sarah and the man sitting next to her. She was still laughing, but it wasn't the easy, carefree laugh I knew so well. It was different, forced, almost too practiced. She caught my gaze for a split second, and then quickly looked away, her smile dropping just a fraction. It was enough for me to notice. Something was off. I tried to stay calm, to make sense of it all. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But my gut told me otherwise. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was going on. Something that I wasn't part of. I forced myself to walk towards them. Every step felt heavy, like I was walking through thick fog. I couldn't escape the growing tension in the air. When I got closer, I heard their conversation. It wasn't anything particularly remarkable, just small talk about work, about life. But there was something in the way they spoke to each other, a familiarity, a connection, that I couldn't ignore. As I approached, the man shifted slightly, making room for me to sit. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a coldness there, a hidden agenda that I couldn't place. I could feel his gaze lingering just a moment too long, sizing me up, almost as if he knew something I didn't. "Hey, Rob," Sarah said, her voice soft, almost too casual. She smiled at me, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided making direct eye contact. "This is Mark. We were just talking about some old memories." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside, everything was spiraling. Mark? Who the hell was this guy? Why had I never heard of him before? And why did he seem so comfortable around my wife? I tried to shake it off, but the more I thought about it, the worse it felt. Mark stood up to shake my hand, his grip firm, almost too firm. "Nice to finally meet you, Rob. I've heard a lot about you." His voice was smooth, but there was a sharp edge to it that didn't sit well with me. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "Nice to meet you too." I sat down, trying to keep things normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding on something I wasn't supposed to see. There was this unspoken tension between the three of us, a silence that hung in the air like a thick fog. Sarah was still avoiding my gaze, her fingers tapping nervously on her glass. Mark, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease, like he belonged there. And I couldn't understand why. I needed to get out of my head for a moment, to clear the fog in my mind. So I turned to the bartender, ordering another drink, anything to break the uncomfortable silence. But as I waited, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. The conversation between Sarah and Mark had shifted. I couldn't hear their words clearly, but I could see the way they were leaning toward each other, their body language too close for comfort. Sarah's hand brushed against his arm, just a casual touch, but it felt like a slap to the face. My heart skipped a beat. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe they were just old friends reconnecting, right? Maybe I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The way they looked at each other, there was history there. Something I wasn't a part of. The bartender slid my drink across the counter, and I grabbed it, trying to steady my nerves. I could feel the weight of their conversation pulling me in, but I didn't want to confront them just yet. I wasn't sure what I was afraid of. Maybe the truth. Maybe what I would find if I looked too closely. But then it happened again. The moment I took a sip of my drink, the entire room seemed to freeze. It wasn't like last time. There was no sudden drop in volume or hushed whispers. It was just stillness. The world around me seemed to pause, and I couldn't understand why. I looked up. The entire room was staring at me. But it wasn't just the people at the bar. It was everyone. Every single person. Their eyes were fixed on me, like they were waiting for something to happen. Waiting for me to do something. And that's when it hit me. The silence wasn't about me walking into the room earlier. It was about something much deeper. Something I wasn't supposed to know. And as the weight of it all settled over me, I realized there was no going back. I had stepped into a world I wasn't prepared for. And the truth? The truth was closer than I thought. The tension in the air was suffocating. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt dry. The stares around me weren't just uncomfortable. They were accusing, like I was somehow at the center of a secret I wasn't meant to uncover. I could feel Sarah's eyes on me, but she didn't meet my gaze. Instead, she fiddled with her glass, her fingers shaking ever so slightly. It was subtle, but I saw it. She was nervous. That was a side of her I hadn't seen in a long time, and it made me uneasy. I turned my attention back to Mark, who was still standing too close to Sarah. His posture was relaxed, but there was a coldness in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. He was studying me, like he was measuring me up. There was something strange about his presence, something that didn't belong in that moment. I tried to force a smile. "So, Mark, how do you know Sarah?" He grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, just a few connections through work. We've known each other a while now." I nodded, but something in his words felt off. "A while, huh?" I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Funny, I don't think I've ever heard about you before." Mark's smile tightened. "Well, not every friend gets mentioned in passing, does he?" He gave a soft chuckle, but it sounded rehearsed. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. There was a weight to his words that I didn't like. It was like he was daring me to ask more questions, to pry into something I wasn't meant to see. The silence stretched out again, thicker this time. I glanced at Sarah, but she was still avoiding me, her eyes trained on the table. That wasn't like her. We'd been together long enough to know each other's moods, to read the little signs when something was wrong. But right now, she was a stranger. I leaned in closer, trying to get her attention. "Sarah, is everything okay?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. She hesitated for a moment before looking up at me, her face tight, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't place. "Yeah," she said quickly, her voice almost too sharp. "Everything's fine, Rob. Just enjoying the night." I didn't believe her, and I don't think she believed herself. Something was happening here, and I was the only one who didn't know about it. The room felt colder suddenly, the energy shifting in ways that were impossible to ignore. It was like the ground was pulling out from under me, and I was slipping, trying to grab hold of anything that made sense. But nothing did. I stood up abruptly, needing space to think, to breathe. "I'll be right back," I muttered, and without waiting for a response, I made my way toward the bathroom. The bathroom was a brief reprieve, but even in there, I couldn't escape the growing sense of dread in my gut. I stared at my reflection, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that I was just tired, that my imagination was running wild. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. When I finally stepped out of the bathroom, I was met with the same silence. It was like the whole room had collectively decided to hold its breath. My heart was racing as I walked back toward the table, every step feeling heavier than the last. And that's when I saw it. Mark and Sarah were standing now, too close again, whispering to each other in a low tone. There was an intimacy in their posture, in the way Sarah was leaning into him, her hand lightly brushing against his arm. It wasn't just a casual touch, it was deliberate. She was making sure I saw it. A cold wave of nausea hit me. I opened my mouth, ready to confront them, to ask what the hell was going on, but before I could say anything, Mark turned to look at me. His eyes narrowed slightly, and in that moment, I knew. He knew I was onto something. He could see the confusion and anger building up inside me. "Everything all right, Rob?" he asked, his voice a little too calm, a little too mocking. I clenched my jaw, trying to steady myself. "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "I was just wondering what exactly is going on here." Sarah's eyes flashed with something. Was it panic? Guilt? I couldn't tell. But she quickly stepped forward, putting a hand on my arm. "Rob, it's nothing. Really. Just, let's not make a scene, okay?" Her voice was strained, but her grip on my arm was too firm, almost like she was trying to keep me from unraveling something I shouldn't. I looked at her, then at Mark, and something clicked. The pieces started to fit together in a way that terrified me. I wasn't imagining this. There was something happening between them, something I wasn't supposed to see. I took a deep breath, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I think I've seen enough. Before Sarah could say anything else, I turned on my heel and walked out of the bar. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face. My mind was spinning, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. But one thing was clear. Whatever was going on, I had just walked into the eye of the storm, and it was only just beginning. I didn't know where I was going at first, just walking aimlessly through the streets. The cold air slapped my face, but it didn't seem to clear my head. Every thought, every image from the bar kept replaying in my mind. Sarah and Mark laughing, leaning into each other, the way she had touched his arm so casually. It was like I was being suffocated by questions I couldn't answer. How long had this been going on? Had I really been so blind? My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone, desperate for something, anything to distract me from the storm raging inside me. I called Sarah. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I was starting to get angry, but that was nothing compared to the dread creeping in. The dread that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a misunderstanding. That something more was happening, something I wasn't prepared for. I walked faster, my thoughts becoming more frantic with each step. The city lights blurred around me, the buzzing of passing cars fading into the background. All I could hear was the thumping of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears. Finally, I stopped in front of a small cafe. It was closed, but the warm light shining through the windows reminded me of something I couldn't quite grasp. The warmth, the safety I thought I had with Sarah. I pulled my phone out again and checked for messages. Nothing from her, but there was a text from Mark. My stomach dropped. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and fear. What could he possibly want to talk about? I knew, deep down, that I was already in too deep. This wasn't going to be a casual conversation. This was something bigger, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I sent a quick response, typing, "What do you mean? About what?" The reply came almost instantly. "You'll find out soon enough." The chill that ran through me wasn't from the night air. It was a cold realization that I was being pulled into something I had no control over. I couldn't stay out here forever. I had to go back. To Sarah. But the thought of facing her, of asking her the questions that had been clawing at me all night, it terrified me. I took a deep breath and turned around, heading back toward the bar. The walk back felt longer than before, every step heavier. When I finally reached the door, I stood there for a moment, looking through the glass. I could see Sarah through the crowd, talking to someone, her face unreadable. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The door swung shut behind me with a soft thud, and the noise of the bar hit me like a wave. The conversations, the clinking of glasses, the laughter, it all felt distant, like I was standing on the edge of some reality I no longer belonged to. I scanned the room quickly, my eyes locking on Sarah. She was sitting at a table in the corner, her posture stiff, her eyes distant as she spoke with a group of her friends. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The same knot that had been there since the moment I stepped outside, the moment I saw her with Mark. I wanted to walk over to her, to demand answers, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. Instead, I moved to the bar, forcing myself to appear calm, as if nothing was wrong. The bartender looked up, nodding in recognition. "What can I get you?" he asked. I forced a smile. "Just a whiskey." "Neat." As I waited for the drink, I couldn't help but glance over at Sarah again. She was laughing, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that made me feel warm inside. It was the kind of laugh that made me feel like an outsider. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something subtle, but undeniable. The bartender handed me my drink, and I took a long sip, the burn of alcohol doing nothing to calm the whirlwind inside me. I needed answers, but I didn't know where to start. Should I confront Sarah now? Should I confront Mark? I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth, whatever it might be. As I stood there, trying to compose myself, I saw Mark again. He was standing by the door, talking to another guy who I didn't recognize. They were laughing, their conversation casual, but there was something in the way Mark glanced over at me that made my skin crawl. His eyes were cold, calculating, like he was sizing me up, waiting for something. I felt my heart race. It was like he was daring me to approach him, to ask him what was really going on. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed more time to figure this out. I looked back at Sarah. This time, She was looking right at me. The moment our eyes met, I saw it. The faintest flicker of something in her gaze, a mix of guilt and fear. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. She quickly turned her head away, but it didn't matter. I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I finished my drink in one go, setting the empty glass down on the counter with a soft clink. I was done waiting. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It felt like everything in that room was closing in on me. The noise, the heat, the way the lights flickered above, making everything look just a little too unreal. I glanced back at Sarah, still seated at that corner table, still surrounded by her friends. But this time, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that tightened in my chest. I wasn't just walking into the unknown. I was walking into something that had already started, something that had been happening under my nose. I felt my hand tighten around the glass of whiskey. I was so close to confronting her, to finally breaking the silence that had been hanging between us all night. But as I took a step towards her, something stopped me. The words I was going to say, the questions, the accusations, felt like they were too much, too soon. What if I was wrong? What if this was all just some strange misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew. The look in her eyes earlier, the way Mark had been standing too close. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't nothing. I turned away from Sarah, pacing toward the back of the bar. I needed to think, to sort through the mess of emotions and questions. I felt trapped in my own head, my mind spinning out of control, trying to make sense of things that didn't make sense. I glanced out the window and saw the city streets outside, cold and indifferent to the storm inside of me. I had to speak to Mark. He was the key. If I could just get him alone, ask him the right questions, maybe I'd find out what was really going on. I made my way toward the back of the bar, where the bathrooms were located, hoping that Mark would be away from the crowd. I needed privacy, away from prying eyes and whispered conversations. As I neared the hallway, I spotted him. He was standing just outside the restroom, talking to a guy I didn't recognize, his back turned to me. I took a deep breath and stepped closer. As soon as I got within a few feet of them, the conversation stopped. The guy Mark was talking to gave me a quick glance, then turned away, as if he knew I wasn't supposed to be part of whatever was going on. Mark, too, turned, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with tension. "Rob," Mark said, his voice almost too calm. "You okay?" I wasn't okay. Not at all. But I forced myself to keep my composure. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the growing fire in my chest. I needed him to know that I wasn't going to back down. Mark glanced around quickly, making sure no one was watching us too closely. His eyes darted to the door of the restroom, then back to me. "Not here," he muttered, his voice lower now. He stepped closer, his presence feeling too overwhelming. "Let's go outside." I didn't hesitate. Whatever he had to say, I needed to hear it. I followed him out the back door of the bar, into the cool night air. The city was quiet here, the sounds of traffic distant, leaving us in a strange bubble of silence. We stood for a moment, facing each other. The air felt heavy, charged, like something was about to snap. Mark shoved his hands into his pockets and glanced away, avoiding my eyes. "Look, I didn't want it to go down like this," he said quietly. "But it's too late to turn back now." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What the hell is going on, Mark? Why are you and Sarah like that?" I could barely choke out the words. I was angry, confused, hurt, all of it at once. Mark finally met my gaze, his expression shifting. "It's not what you think, Rob. But I'm not the one you need to talk to. You need to talk to Sarah. She's the one hiding the truth from you, not me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean? What truth?" My voice cracked on the last word, the desperation in me finally breaking through. Mark's jaw tightened. He looked around again, as if making sure we weren't being overheard. "She's been seeing someone else. It's been going on for months." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like poison. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way, but it's time, Rob. You deserve to know." My mind went blank. I couldn't process what he was saying. No, you're lying. Sarah wouldn't." "Sarah wouldn't what?" "Sarah wouldn't cheat on you." Mark interrupted, his voice harder now. "Come on, man. I'm telling you the truth. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. She's been involved with someone else for a while now. And not just anyone. You know him." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said, My voice barely a whisper, the weight of his words sinking in. Mark leaned in, his voice low and urgent. It's Chris. You remember him, don't you? The guy from your work. He's the one she's been seeing. My head spun. Chris. Of course. I'd known him for years. He was a colleague, someone I trusted. But this was the last thing I would have ever expected. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, and there was no way out. I stood there in stunned silence, my mind racing, trying to grasp what Mark had just said. Chris, the guy from work. It didn't make sense. How could Sarah, my wife, be involved with him? The idea seemed so far-fetched that for a moment, I convinced myself I had heard him wrong. But Mark's eyes told me everything. He wasn't lying. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thin, like the weight of his words was pressing on my chest. No, this can't be true. My voice came out cracked, like I was fighting to keep my sanity intact. Mark looked at me, his expression unreadable. I wish it weren't, Rob, but it is, and I didn't want to be the one to tell you. But you deserve to know. I shook my head, barely able to hold it together. You're saying Sarah and Chris have been together? Behind my back? My throat tightened, the sting of betrayal beginning to settle in. Mark nodded slowly. Yeah, they've been seeing each other for months. I'm sorry, man. I couldn't process it. It felt like everything I thought I knew was collapsing. How had I missed this? How had Sarah hidden it all from me? I stepped back, as if trying to put distance between myself and the truth Mark had just dropped on me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, my voice strained. Why wait until now? Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. I didn't want to make things worse. I knew Sarah would eventually tell you herself. I didn't want to get in the middle of it. But I can't just watch you walk around like everything's fine when it's not. You deserve to know what's really going on. I felt a wave of anger surge through me. So, you've known about this for months? And you're just telling me now? I didn't want to be the one to tear your life apart, Mark said quietly. But you need to face the reality, Rob. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to yell at him, tell him it wasn't his place to tell me this, but I couldn't. The anger wasn't just directed at Mark. It was at Sarah, at myself, at the whole situation. I had been blind, too trusting. I stood there for a long moment, struggling to keep my emotions in check. Where is she now? I asked, my voice low and steady, despite the storm inside me. Sarah, where is she? Mark hesitated before answering. She's still inside. With Chris. I felt a sharp pain in my chest at the mention of his name. The world around me seemed to tilt, the noise of the bar fading into the background. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront Sarah, drag her out of there, and demand an explanation. But another part of me, perhaps the part that was still clinging to the hope that this was all just some horrible misunderstanding, wanted to turn around and leave, pretend like none of this had ever happened. But I knew I couldn't do that. I needed answers. I nodded, finally making up my mind. I'm going back in. I need to see for myself. I didn't wait for Mark to say anything else. I turned around, heading back toward the bar, my legs feeling like they were moving on autopilot. I couldn't ignore it any longer. Whatever was happening between Sarah and Chris, I needed to face it head on. No more running. As I walked back through the door, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. The noise inside the bar was still the same. People laughing, music playing, glasses clinking, but it all felt distant, like I was walking through a fog. I scanned the room, looking for Sarah. She was at the same table, her back to me, talking to Chris. The way they were sitting so close together, laughing too easily, the way she was touching his arm, was like a slap in the face. I stood there for a moment, frozen. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every part of me wanted to storm over there, confront her, demand answers. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Instead, I took another step forward, slowly. As I did, Sarah turned and caught my eye. For a split second, time seemed to stop. There was panic in her eyes, but also something else, regret, guilt, and maybe fear. She stood up quickly, but I held up my hand, stopping her before she could say anything. Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite everything inside me telling me to break down. We need to talk. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words caught in her throat. She looked over at Chris, who had gone silent, and then back to me. There was a long pause. The entire room felt like it had quieted, as if waiting for her to respond. Finally, she spoke. I didn't want you to find out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then tell me the truth, Sarah. Tell me what's been going on. She took a deep breath and glanced down at the table, her fingers trembling. I've been confused, Rob. I didn't know how to tell you. Things between us haven't been the same. But I made a huge mistake. I should have talked to you. I should have been honest from the start. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I swallowed it down. So, this is your way of fixing things? Hiding it from me? No, she whispered, her voice cracking. I never wanted to hide it from you. I was scared. I didn't know how to fix everything that had gone wrong between us. I felt a pang of sorrow. Sarah wasn't a bad person. I knew that. But I also knew I couldn't continue living in the dark, pretending everything was fine. I don't know where we go from here, I said quietly. But I'm willing to try. I want to understand. I want to know if we can fix this, but I can't do it if you're not honest with me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I want that too. I'm so sorry, Rob. In that moment, something shifted between us. The tension, the betrayal. It didn't disappear, but it felt like a door had opened. The path ahead wasn't clear, but it was a start. Sarah wasn't perfect, and neither was I. But we both wanted to rebuild, to fix the mess we'd made. Chris, standing silently beside the table, finally spoke. I think I should go, he said softly, looking at both of us. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked toward the door. The air felt lighter, the weight lifting just a little. Sarah looked at me, her eyes full of uncertainty. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to try. I need to make it right. I took her hand, a small gesture, but one that meant everything in that moment. We'll figure this out, I said, but only if we're both honest. No more hiding. She squeezed my hand, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of hope. We had a long road ahead of us. There were going to be tough conversations, painful realizations, and maybe even more moments where we felt like giving up. But at least we were facing it together, finally willing to put in the work. As we left the bar, side by side, I knew it wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning of something new, something real. And maybe, just maybe, we'd find our way back to the place we once were.